But in between heavy sets, the DJs kept playing a 3-minute song whose curiously catchy sound enraptured the audience.
It was so beautiful, really beautiful, and his songs were just, they were girls' lyrics, weren't they? Ride a white swan. I mean, it's like, what guy would say ride a white swan? I mean, it's so limp-wristed. It's beautiful.
I remember seeing Bolan after all these heavy bands had been on stage, and he came on stage and he said, "Hi, my name's Mark. You might have seen me on Top of the Pops," you know. And all the blokes in the audience were picking up clods of earth and chucking them at him, and all their girlfriends were going, "No, he's lovely. Leave him alone."
It was Ride a White Swan by Marc Bolan, who the audience had known up until then as a winsome acoustic folkie.
It was pretty much bongos, acoustic guitar, and a voice. Eventually he had a Ride a White Swan, they put drums on it, and he saw the evolution that there was actually a gap. It was kind of similar to when Bob Dylan went electric. Cut it down, made it more raw, brought that sound together and moved forward.
Things began to take off for the electrified T.REX with their first appearance on Top of the Pops. Having already persuaded him to wear some unusually colourful clothes for the occasion, his publicist had a last-minute idea that would launch Bolan's pop career.
Just as he was going on stage, on Top of the Pops, live, after having done the rehearsal already, she got a whole lot of glitter and just threw it into his face. And that was really what made his image for the next 3 years.
Since the death of the Beatles, there'd been a vacuum in pop, and newly dandified Marc Bolan answered the prayers of teenage girls the country over.
The girls went crazy over Marc. He was adorable. He was one of the most beautiful men I've ever met in my life. And I remember Ringo Starr said to me, as a Beatle, "I've never seen anything like this." He says, "Those girls are crazy." And they were. They wanted to rip him to pieces.
Get It On heralded the moment when glam rock was invented. Mixing up sexually suggestive lyrics with childish rhymes, colourful clothes with a thrusting rock guitar, Marc Bolan made girls scream again and opened the doors to a world that would eventually belong to one of his pals from the 60s fringes. But first, he too would have to undergo his own transformation.
Just look through your window. Look who sits outside.
In fact, David Bowie wasn't even sure he wanted to be a pop star at all. Flirting with the theatre, he studied mime and dance with theatrical guru Lindsay Kemp.
Don't you know you're driving your mom and
Marc and David, who were doing the glam rock thing to its fullest, weren't really afraid of what people thought of them. And although it took courage to do that, it takes courage to for a man to wear makeup and to put on these clothes and to be right out front and in your face. It really takes courage. But I think as a British phenomenon, it had favor already. You know, everyone went to pantomime and saw men dressed as women, you know. And so it wasn't like that really unusual, that strange. Only the context was new. It was like now it was rock.
By 1972, Bowie had joined Bolan at the top of the glam rock world. Pop music was back for the first time since the Beatles' heyday, and 3-minute pop songs dominated the charts. Between them, they would foster a sound and look that was both innocent and subversive.
During the early 70s, it became more overt, but the people who were actually representing it were people that were straight. Do you say like Jagger? You know, this ambiguous sexuality and effeminate presentation was done by men at that time. And Marc Bolan was certainly not gay.
It's not just a bunch of fellas wandering around looking like big puffs. I remember David pointing out that Elvis one dyed his hair and had worn eye makeup from the beginning. So it was an intrinsic part of rock and roll, at least of a certain very important element in rock and roll. In fact, most of the sex going on that scene was heterosexual sex. There was quite a fair dollop of the other kind, but most of it was heterosexual sex. If you wanted to get the really hip girls, you better look like one of them.
Everybody wanted in on glam. Even the kings of the 60s realized that camping it up was now the only game in town.
The when I first saw Bolan and Bowie, they looked like they could have come from Mars, really. But it would be possible for you to turn yourself into it. Plus, it was always a way that working class tough nuts could be all right with their feminine side.
First heard Marc Bolan, I was at school in Leeds, and just let me know that there was something else going on out there. You weren't sure even what it was. You couldn't even give it a name. It was just something, the way he will glitter on his face, the way he was kind of effeminate. It was hard to believe that now, but it was very shocking at its time. And it created a divide in the school playground. Usually me and the girls that like T.REX and all the lads, they kind of like posturing rock.